I understand that I'm late to the topic at hand, it's nonetheless important to talk about the situation in Canada, despite the fact that it's been silent over the Ukrainian conflict. Nonetheless, it's still very important because right now there are a lot of freedom convoys that are happening all across the world, not just here in the United States. In fact, the People's Convoy, or the USA Freedom Convoy, has left today from California and are going to head to D.C. Sometime in March 1st, which is when Joe Biden gives his State of the Union address. I can't wait to see how that occurs, because there's definitely probably gonna be a lot of drama, probably similar to that what's been happening to Canada. So here's the recap of what happened with Canada. Justin Trudeau had to deal with the fact that there were tens of thousands of protesters who were supporting the Freedom Convoy and were in Ottawa. He tried to criticize them, tried to insult them by calling them a fringe minority, that they had unacceptable views, that they were a bunch of Nazis, white supremacists. I still find it funny that I actually called people that, specifically people who drive trucks for a living, who are supplying a lot of the products all across the country of Canada. But nonetheless, it got so bad that he actually he fled Ottawa and invoked the Emergencies Act. This actually gave power to the federal government of Canada to clamp down on the Freedom Convoy protest. And considering the footage, as well as a lot of evidence and articles regarding what the Ottawa Police Department did in order to quell the protest, it's not looking good for Justin Trudeau. Already, he's very unpopular, with at least 16% support. And even though that the Canadian Parliament passed the use of the Emergencies Act, with the help of the New Democratic Party, alongside with the Liberal Party, because of the fact that the Liberal Party is a minority government, it nonetheless has garnered a lot of ire for Justin Trudeau, to the point where people are calling him a dictator, with good reason. After all, the Freedom Convoy, compared to that of BLM, did not really do too much damage, and they didn't really cause any desecration of any statues, despite what the mainstream media would like you to believe. And while there have been some articles from the Canadian mainstream media talking about how a lot of Canadians may sympathize but oppose the Freedom Truckers, after the release of footage from what has been happening with Ottawa, I would not be surprised if there have been major changes of mind in regards to Canadians, because a lot of people do not like the idea of their own supposedly democratic government clamping down on free, peaceful protests, especially that was happening with the Freedom Convoy. And they did not like the idea of the federal government freezing financial assets from inside banks of people who were in support of the Freedom Convoy. Now this, I would not be surprised, actually convinced Justin Trudeau, the day after Parliament approved the use of the Emergencies Act, to rescind it, saying that the state of emergency is now over, and apparently you cannot unfreeze the financial assets of these people. I'm honestly kind of suspicious on Justin Trudeau. I'm pretty sure that he wants to make the emergency powers permanent. He wants to make the idea of getting rid of or freezing financial assets of Canadian individuals to be within the government's power. But nonetheless, there has been what happened as a result of the Emergencies Act is having a major sway on the Canadian political mind. I would not be surprised if a lot of people now support the Freedom Convoy, and maybe, just maybe, there will be some more protests as a result. Because this use of the Emergencies Act is kind of uncalled for. In fact, I would argue that this is not, that in terms of maybe Niccolo Machiavelli as well as Sun Tzu, this would not be something that he would they would approve of in the use of brutality. Niccolo Machiavelli in The Prince actually talked about the use of brutality and to make it completely swift to prevent any opposition. And there's so much more to go into with The Prince. So, actually, I could maybe make a new video talking about specific chapters of The Prince, which, if you guys want to, I'll be able to do. But let's save that for another time. In the case of Sun Tzu, he would absolutely disapprove of this because of the idea of appearing strong when you're weak, appearing weak when you are strong. And this example applies to Justin Trudeau, especially with his response to the Freedom Convoy protests. He could have easily said, considering that he's weak, he doesn't really have this much support. The protesters, considering the size of them, had a lot of public support. He could have easily said, while I do not agree with the Freedom Convoy, I will allow them, as long as they're peaceful, to protest against the government, which would have been completely fine. Hell, it would have been even better if he just came out there and tried to make some kind of compromise with the Freedom Convoy. But instead, he decided to, again, label them as a small fringe minority with unacceptable views and a bunch of neo-Nazis and white supremacists. All based upon two people holding a Nazi flag and a Confederate flag. Just to clarify, the person who was wearing who was flying the Nazi flag, was making that as a statement as, do you want Canada to turn into this? Because that's what Justin Trudeau is pushing us to do. And considering what happened with the Emergencies Act and the crackdown of the Freedom Convoy in Canada, yeah, he's not wrong on that perspective. Of course, with the Canadian having the Confederate flag, he was immediately kicked out of the Freedom Convoy. But to continue on with the example, that was where the part of it says, appear strong when you are weak, appear weak when you are strong. Partially that includes talking to the Canadian truckers in order to reach a compromise, but there's also another good example of trying to gain as much support for the government instead of that of the Freedom Truckers. Like, potentially protesters could shoot themselves in the foot, maybe start some kind of riot. At that point, people would definitely not like the idea of the Freedom Convoy. But obviously they did do that, and obviously Justin Trudeau did do that, and he decided to use the Emergencies Act anyway. It overall appears weak. And considering that half of the ministers, the premiers of Canada throughout the Canadian provinces disapprove of this, you are 100. I would not be surprised if this would hurt Justin Trudeau's political career. I would not be surprised one bit. People would definitely consider this fresh in their memory, especially with the fact that they've been dealing with COVID-19 for at least 2 years. Already, the vaccination rate for Canadians is 90%, and yet the mandates and the lockdowns have not been lifted in Canada. In fact, you could easily say that they've been more of a restrictive, not counting the several provinces that have actually rescinded said restrictions, like Alberta, Saskatchewan, Quebec, and even to some extent Ontario. But nonetheless, the federal government's just still clamping down on this. I don't understand why they're still doing this. It's a losing issue, kind of like critical race theory here in the United States. Hell, Stick Sex and Hammer actually made a video in regards to this. I encourage you to look it up, and I'm not going to put it down the description down below because it's not relevant to this topic. But again, this definitely will not help Justin Trudeau in the near future. Already Canadians hate him. He has 16% approval, while apparently the truckers at their highest had 34 to 38% approval. I wouldn't be surprised if it actually has risen since then. And this will definitely affect the Liberal Party in the next general election. Hell, it's going to affect all across the world. It obviously shows that that, as I mentioned before at the very beginning of this video, that the People's Convoy or the U.S. Freedom Convoy has started its travel from California into D.C. Thanks to the Freedom Convoy in Canada, as well as its major effect, it has sparked numerous other freedom convoys across the Western world. From here in the United States, that of, say, France, Austria, Brussels, Amsterdam, and a few other places, and it's just exploding. Hell, even with the fact that there was a major crackdown in Canada, I'm pretty sure that this will only reinvigorate Canadians to continue to protest against these COVID restrictions. As long as that's the case, as long as there are mandates going on, they're going to try to do whatever in their power to affect change by trying to some degree, in fact, to some major degree, hurt the Canadian federal government. Just as a clarification note, they cost the Canadian federal government 500 million Canadian dollars in trade revenue. Who's to say that won't happen? That won't be a major effect in DC? I know that Joe Biden is absolutely afraid. Hell, he's trying to get the DC police to arm up, trying to prepare for the Freedom Convoy, and the National Guard apparently has been activated. I wouldn't be surprised if Antifa tried to join up to cause some kind of trouble. But nonetheless, this shows that these leaders, these so-called leaders of our democracies, our republics, are afraid of the freedom convoys because they know they can affect change. My name is Noah Meehan on The Arc Truth. Please post your comments down below, subscribe and share with friends. Also, if you have any issues regards to my videos, such as how I speak or the clarity of this video, anything that's on your mind, please post them down in the comment section down below or directly message me. Thank you.
Almost head.